Hi, I'm Shawn Achor. I'm the author of The Happiness Advantage and Big Potential, and I research in a field called positive psychology, which studies not just depression and disorder, but looks at people who rise above the curve in terms of their levels of optimism and happiness in the midst of extraordinary amounts of stress. And I'm so excited to be able to share our new 6-part interactive series that we've created called The Optimistic Household, which is designed to foster higher levels of well-being, both social well-being and emotional well-being as well. So over the past several weeks, we've been flooded by requests and by superintendents across the globe who have been asking, how do we actually foster social and emotional well-being, not only for our teachers who are being asked to do so much, but also for the families as well, who seem to be suffering not only what we've been experiencing in terms of the crisis, but also the fact that many of us have become co-teachers as well. And many of those superintendents are looking at how do they actually support individuals in the midst of the unprecedented challenges we've been experiencing. Families have lost family members, they've lost jobs. There's so much uncertainty, as you know. And in the midst of that, how do we actually create the most adaptive response, and what can you do to be able to help? As I've been reflecting about what we could do, I realized we have this great corpus of research that just needs to get out to people more. I spent 12 years at Harvard initially trying to understand how when a brain becomes more positive, it becomes more adaptive to the world. When that occurs, every single business and educational outcome we know how to test for rises dramatically. We've been able to do that work out across the nation with over 100 school districts, raising up not only levels of happiness, but in doing so, not only their test scores rise, but we see depression rates dropping. We see calls to emergency centers drop. We see the amount of disciplinary actions drop significantly. So as we've done this research, we know that if we want to create social and emotional well-being, you have to create it not just for the students, but you also have to create it for the teachers and the staff and the superintendents trying to create that. But in the midst of the COVID crisis, we realized that we have a whole extra group of people that we needed to support, which were the families, who oftentimes have become those co-teachers. They were taking on many of those challenges themselves. And we need to find a way of being able to pair the emotional and social well-being that we were seeing at the schools with what was occurring at the home. In the midst of this COVID crisis, my wife, Michelle Geelan, who's a happiness researcher, and myself have gotten the opportunity to get to test out these tools and this research ourselves with our 6-year-old who's been home and our little 2-year-old as well. So we've seen some of the challenges that can occur, but also we've been able to see which of these tools actually has an application within an optimistic household, and how do we sustain that type of positive change. The neuroscience and the data behind these principles reaffirms the idea that students who possess hope and optimism and social connection and embrace their mistakes, they are the ones that not only become the most adaptive learners, but they succeed at higher levels, not only academically, but eventually professionally and also emotionally as well. Building these essential capabilities with our families is critical to maintaining the mission that you have. That is to create not only greater levels of education in a school, but for those children as well. By making these modules available to you and to the students' families, we believe that we can help support the work that you're doing to build up optimism and benefiting everyone in the process. These tools and these skills are firmly grounded in the research and the neuroscience that we've been doing for across 50 countries, that's been published in the top psychology journals, that we've been using not only in schools, but we've been using in hospitals in the midst of the challenge, talking about how do you start talking about the positive when life doesn't look like we want it to. And how do you do this with farmers who have lost their lands in Zimbabwe? How do you do this with individuals in the wake of the Pulse nightclub shooting and the Boston bombing? And in each one of those cases, what we keep finding is that we don't just have to be our genes and our environment's response to the world. That by crafting these simple activities within our life, these daily habits, creating deeper social connection, scanning for purpose and meaning within our lives, and helping people create a ritual about that so that it becomes a habit inside those families, we not only build resilience, we build greater levels of optimism, happiness, well-being, and test scores start to improve dramatically. We see people staying in school longer. We find graduation rates rising. We find likelihood of finding a job afterward rising. We find every single business outcome improving once they get out to the professional world. We have an opportunity to create one of the greatest competitive advantages in the modern economy for a brain by making more positive and engaged, but we can do that even in the midst of a challenge and crisis if we find a way of being able to create this together instead of alone. So I hope that you enjoy the Optimistic Household. We poured ourselves into these ideas, and we know that in the midst of these unexpected challenges, it's easier to talk about happiness later. But in the research that we've been doing, and that just came out in an article we published in the Harvard Business Review, we found that the sooner leaders start providing positive messaging and get these ideas out and create positive habits in the midst of a challenge, the faster we rise out of it and the better we bear those challenges. So we hope that we can help support you in the incredible work that you're doing, and I hope you're doing well in the midst of all of the challenges you're experiencing as well. Thank you.